Hello, everybody. My name is Laura Stewart, as Barb said, and I'm so pleased to be here with Barb, my colleague, and also with Louisa and Bruce. And I see that we're still just filling the seats here. People are coming in fast and furious. It's really great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this webinar, this exciting webinar. So here's some things we're going to do with our time together this evening. I'll just talk a little bit about 95% group for those of you who might be new to 95% group and about what our whole literacy ecosystem involves. Then I'll introduce Bruce and Louisa, and they'll talk about spellography and what it means to have a multilinguistic systematic approach, the layers of language, and what it means to get started with spellography. And then stay tuned because at the end we have a giveaway of spellography, but everybody's a winner. So we're going to give something to everybody. So please stick with us. Very exciting things. So if you could advance the next slide, Louisa, just a little bit about 95% group. I kind of always start with this slide because I assume there are some of you joining us tonight that maybe don't know about 95% group. These are really our principles that we that really drive our work here at 95% group and really kind of keep us grounded in why we do what we do. So our purpose is to unlock the power of literacy for every child, and we have a mission. We want to build on the science by empowering teachers, all educators actually, with knowledge and resources, great resources like spellography, and support through professional learning to help transform developing leaders. And our vision is to give all of you, all educators, what they need to really master and enjoy what you do in providing the best instruction for your students. So that's a little bit about us. We also have, I think, a very unique literacy ecosystem approach. And I'm really proud to be part of this organization that has really built this powerful literacy ecosystem. It's a suite of products. Our products are aligned across all tiers of instruction. That consistency across tiers is really vital to our students' success. And our products also align with the evidence when it comes to the research base of the science of reading, and also the evidence or efficacy base that shows that our products work with real teachers and real classrooms with real kids. We have strong professional learning and coaching to support our products and resources. And we have a 95, what we call literacy intervention system that is really providing that consistency and alignment across tiers of instruction to meet the needs of all of our learners. So, speaking of our ecosystem approach, I just want to highlight this pyramid that really showcases our flagship products in each tier of instruction. So if you look at the kind of the green layer there, that's our tier 1 core program. Our phonics core program spans K through 5. If you look at the blue band, that's our tier 2 intervention phonics lesson library, which is fully aligned with tier 1. And then we have our very unique tier 3 flagship offering called 95 Wrap, which is really a one-of-a-kind individualized approach for our students who need the most intensive intervention. And all of these tiers, again, are aligned through the same scope and sequence, with each tier giving more time, intensity, and focus of instruction. And we are proud to share that spellography is part of our literacy ecosystem. It can be used in tier 1, and it also can be used in intervention, tier 2, all the way up through high school. So super excited to talk about spellography tonight. One last thing, at the very bottom of the pyramid, you'll notice that all of our resources are underscored by strong professional learning, comprehensive learning, top 10 tools, but also professional learning on our products, along with what I think is our crown jewel, which is our coaching. So with that background, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers tonight. So first, Dr. Louisa Moats, who likely does not need an introduction, but she is, as we all know, a leading voice in literacy, and she is a lifelong champion of all of us in education. Louisa has been a teacher and a psychologist and a researcher, a graduate school faculty member, and an author of many influential scientific journal articles and books and policy papers on the topics of reading, spelling, language, and teacher prep. You certainly know her. as the co-author of Letters and the groundbreaking book Speech to Print, Language Essentials for Teachers, among many, many other important works. She has been on the board at International Dyslexic Association for many years, and she helped develop those knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading. She's here tonight to talk about spellography with her co-author, Bruce Rosow. Bruce began his career as an intermediate grade classroom teacher in Vermont before moving into remedial instruction. He also served as an academic dean. Dr. Rosow taught in the Language and Literacy program through the Reading Institute in Williamstown, Massachusetts, Simmons College, and Bay Path University. He ran the Language Lab at the Wyndham Central Supervisory Unit in Vermont, which provided remedial instruction to struggling middle and high school readers, and he is currently a private tutor. Louisa has shared with all of us that Bruce is an expert teacher who really brings spellography to life. And tonight we're just so glad to have him with us. So welcome to you, Louisa and Bruce, and I'll turn it over to you, Louisa.
Thank you so much, Laura. Bruce and I are really happy that we're working with the 95% group and appreciate very much all the support they're giving us with the development of spellography and helping people understand out there what it's all about. I have been working with Bruce for about 25 years. We did the first version of Spellography in 2004, and this one is a big rewrite, but the underlying ideas of it are the same, and this program wouldn't exist without Bruce, his skill as a teacher, his creativity, and the fact that he drafted all of these lessons in the beginning. It's really his work that this final product relies on as even more than mine. So don't let him talk you out of that. So what are we trying to do with this program? It's aimed at intermediate kids who are not very good at spelling, and most often they also have some weaknesses in their reading skills. Um, our aim is to not only educate them about words and build their word knowledge for spelling and reading and all of the skills that depend on word knowledge, but also to foster their interest in exploring language. We want kids to have fun. We want kids to get interested. We want kids to like words because they discover that words have stories and words have interesting relationships, and words are wonderful to use as tools in expressing ourselves. So in order to do this, we use what we call a multilinguistic structured language approach, and it addresses systematically all of the layers of language, the phoneme level of language, phoneme grapheme correspondences, patterns in English orthography, meaningful parts of words or morphology, the history and origin of words or etymology, and the use of words in context, which means their grammatical roles in sentences and how they are used to express meaning within a sentence context. So just the basics here is we designed this to be a word study program for intermediate and older kids if it's appropriate. And our wish is that the program be taught 30 minutes 3 times weekly, because frequent distributed practice is much better than occasional practice or concentrated practice when it comes to learning things like concepts about words. There are 6 lessons per unit. It takes, we hope, about 2 weeks to go through each unit. This can be used in a small group format, or it can be used with a whole class, as long as kids demonstrate the prerequisite skills for being in whatever level you're choosing. We have progress monitoring built into the program in the form of dictations that occur regularly and reviews at the ends of lessons and at the ends of units. So you have ample opportunity to check whether or not the kids are learning the concepts that are being taught. Just a reminder here, an underlying framework for the design of spellography is brain science on how we learn words and the reality of the, uh, the mental process that we have to learn as spellers and as readers, in which we connect the speech sound system of language with the letters and letter groups that represent spoken language, and we connect those sound symbol correspondences with meaning. So this constant interplay between sound, print, and meaning is an underlying design principle with spellography. We progress through a unit from a concentration on the identity of speech sounds through awareness of letter patterns or orthographic, uh, uh, um, yeah, orthographic patterns, and that's the best word for it, and principles and some rules, a few rules. And we put words that we're learning in the context of sentences and focus a lot also on their grammatical use. Morphology is a big part of what we teach as kids get the basics under their belts. So we talk a lot in spellography about the layers of language, and through each unit progress from phonology to orthography to morphology to syntax, weaving these layers of language together. And so let's have a look at what that means. If I ask you to think about how you know the word astronaut, we can tell from uh, rigorous laboratory studies that when we ask someone to recall a word like astronaut, what happens in the brain, if that recall is fast and efficient, is that the brain has established associations to the words morphemes, or we process the words morphemes. In this case, astro and not are Greek combining forms. Astro referring to stars and not referring to traveling. We process the written syllable structure of the word, which is as, stro, not, as I've broken it up here. But also we relate those written syllables to the sounds of the syllables in speech, which are astronaut, actually, with the schwa in the second syllable. We don't say astronaut, we say astronaut when we speak. Those syllables are represented with written graphemes. And what is a grapheme? It's a letter or letter combination that represents a speech sound. So the graphemic structure of language represents phonemes, and phonemes are spoken together in an articulated word. They are not spoken as separate units, even though each of these phonemes that I've written out here is a building block for making words in our language. And we process these phonemes as part of our language system, not just as abstract sounds. When we talk about our brains register that as a building block of speech, and we need to learn how to represent each of these building blocks with graphemes, which our orthography does in a somewhat oblique or indirect way. So if I were to conceptualize how we learn about orthography, and if I were to talk about how we learn sound symbol correspondences, we think about where we start with kids, which is to teach them that the sound ah is represented by the letter A, right? So, or we teach them the other way around in most instances that the letter A represents ah. Of course, I prefer to do it from speech to print, where we say ah is represented by the letter A. But how does that work in orthography? Ah is a short vowel, as you know, that occurs in closed syllables. It does not occur in open syllables. So right away, there's a context in an orthographic pattern in which that correspondence occurs. It's in closed syllables, and half of the syllables in English are closed syllables. That is, they have short vowels that have consonants, one or more consonants behind them at the end of the syllable. And furthermore, we say but when the letter A spells the suffix al, as in astronautical, perhaps, then we don't pronounce the A as a. We pronounce it as a schwa or as an but the spelling of that morphological pattern, that suffix al, is constant because it is a meaningful part that also has a grammatical role, which is to mark the word that ends in al as an adjective or a noun. So it is too simple to approach the teaching of orthography or spelling by just imagining that we can get by teaching phoneme grapheme correspondences or PGCs. We have to embed that learning within these larger patterns of the orthography, especially syllable patterns, within the layer of morphology that determines how we represent meaningful parts, and also in terms of the usage of words or how words are used grammatically to convey meaning. And this too is an underlying principle of the design of spellography. So I'm going to give you a quick spelling test. Don't cheat and put it in your spell checker, but if you have a pencil or you can just write something down or imagine it in your minds, how do you spell the word forward? As in, I appreciate reading the forward to the textbook. Did you spell it like this? Or did you spell it like this? And here's an example of these two words sounding the same, forward, sounding like forward. Forward is a noun, and F-O-R-E is the spelling that means in front of, that the word's in front of something. But forward with a W-A-R-D is an adjective, and it is part of a family of words. I believe this is a Anglo-Saxon suffix. Am I right, Bruce? I hope. As in toward, onward, backward, afterward, upward. And this is a word family to which this word belongs, to which that word does not belong. So here's an example of how spelling represents meaning and syntax. Whoops, I gave you the second one. I was going to ask you to spell this. Accommodation. How do you spell this? And it is, in spite of the fact that it's a very common word, especially in our profession, it is one of the most often misspelled. And why is it misspelled? Because people are not sure whether to use two C's here or two M's typically. And I often see one M in somebody's misspelling of accommodation. And how do you remember this? And how would we ultimately teach this to kids? We want the kids to process this as a series of meaningful parts in which the prefix AC, which is an assimilated prefix attached to com, attached to mode or modus, the Latin root here, with a suffix 8, which gets changed as ion, gets added to it in Asian. The suffix ion is different from the syllable tion. So the structure of the word is this. And people have a much better time, or will be much more accurate once they have processed the word at this level. And it's something we build toward in spellography. Okay, here's another word for you to spell, and I will not give it to you. The word is conscious, as in, I want people to be conscious of how words are put together. How do you spell it? Well, that too is one of the more often misspelled words in the language, but it's easier to spell if you know its structure. So it is made up of con, meaning with, SCI, which is the root related to knowledge, and OUS, which is an adjective suffix. So when you think of the word conscious as these three parts being combined into the word meaning with knowledge or with awareness, then it makes sense. So what we're striving for in spellography is building kids' approach to language, where if they're learning a new word, they will start asking, what are the meaningful parts? How is this word used in context? What does that have to do with the way we spell the word? And if I can't recall it, then I might look it up for its language of origin, for its meaningful parts, and for the way it is used in a sentence. So here are other words in this family of words that come from the same Latin root: science, conscientious, conscience, and SCIs in all of them. Once I learned this, I stopped wondering how to spell these words, because then it all made sense. Still learning. Okay, so the lesson flow in an individual lesson begins with the introduction of a concept. Then we do a phoneme awareness exercise, which I'll illustrate in a moment. Then we study the pattern. We analyze the pattern of spelling. We build words with the pattern for spelling and practice using them. We also give reading practice with that word concept, or that spelling concept. We give a dictation, and that dictation is useful as a diagnostic exercise as well. But it is not like a weekly test where we give kids a list to memorize and then regurgitate. The dictation is used to have kids show what they have integrated from the instruction about the constituents of the word, the spelling, sound, and meaning constituents of the words they are learning, and we question them during and after the dictation about, why did you spell the word the way it was? Or if you think about this or that we taught you, then you can correct your misspelling of this word. So that dictation is a teaching exercise. It is not a rote memorization exercise. And we do have kids working at the sentence level also to familiarize themselves with the roles of words within sentence context. So a few words about what we're doing with phonology. I know there are ongoing debates about the usefulness of phoneme awareness instruction and so on that are going on the internet. But we know that kids cannot map words accurately in memory unless they have they have perceived the string of speech sounds that make up the word, because phoneme grapheme mapping or matching is not possible unless kids have what Bruce has deemed the parking spots to which we attach the graphemes. And the parking spots are the individual phonemes that the graphemes represent. So what do we teach? We teach vowel sound identification and use the vowel chart that is in letters, it's in speech to print, it's in everything else I've ever written. Consonant sound identification, so kids are aware of the subtle differences between consonant pairs that are quite similar in their features. We teach syllable accent and schwa because that's really important for spelling multisyllabic words. And in later lessons, in the later units, we work a lot with words that shift their accent in derived forms of the words. For example, the difference between define, definition, and definitive, which all share a base word. So, for example, in Unit 13 in Book C, this whole book is focused very much on work with vowel teams, what are traditionally called vowel teams. But our approach is to begin with vowel sound substitution in an oral exercise that takes a couple of minutes at the most. So it goes like this. Say bait. Change A to O. What's the word? Boat. Say trail. Say change A to O. What's the new word? Troll. Say prose. Change O to A. What's the new word? Praise. Say froze. Change O to A. And you should say phrase. Say broke. Change O to What's the new word? Brook. Say shook. Change to What's the new word? Shuck. Say showed. Change O to What's the new word? Should. So that's what we do. We target the vowel, that we target the element that is being addressed in the lesson. So we move then from an exercise like that into working directly with the print. But in the course of doing this, we use the vowel chart as a reference point. The vowel chart is in the cover or close to the covers of the book. You can easily find it. We ask kids to be familiar with this, not to memorize it as such, but to use it as a reference point. And we all use it as a reference point. So, for example, if kids are having trouble perceiving or recognizing or coming up with the difference between and or and for example, these vowels are close in articulation. That's what the vowel chart represents. And we can point out to kids that the difference in articulation is subtle, and we can refer to what their mouth is doing, give them articulatory cues in order to help refine their attentiveness to the subtle differences in vowels that feel similar in articulation and that sound quite a bit alike, because that is necessary, again, the necessary underpinning for learning the different spellings for the vowels. At the syllable level, we work on helping kids identify the stress patterns in multisyllabic words. And why is that? Because so many derived forms of words like accent and accentuate or signify and significant change the stress on syllables so that the vowel sound changes in a derived form of the word. So the exercise is simply to put some cards down on the desk and to pound the one that's harder or push the one up that is accented in spoken words. So accent would be accent, but accentuate would be accentuate. I can't move these very well. Signify versus significant. Many kids with spelling problems are insensitive to stress patterns in spoken words. So this kind of rehearsal of listening for the stress patterns and dwelling on the stress syllable vocally can help them realize that a word like signify is related to significant, or a word like preceded is related to precedence, even though those two forms of the word don't sound alike. If kids are used to the idea that there will be accent shifts that affect the vowel pronunciation, they will be more inclined to make use of the similarity in spelling to then access the similarity in meaning. Let's talk about orthography and the patterns in the writing system. I'll get to morphology in a second. Okay, patterns in the writing system that are purely at an orthographic level, and issues in phoneme grapheme correspondences that are particularly difficult for kids. Another source of information that has affected our choice of emphasis and the amount of practice that we give kids on certain concepts is simply derived from all of the research on spelling errors that kids make. And the observations of many researchers like Rebecca Treeman comes to mind right away, and Marie Cassar, their observations of the sound symbol correspondences that are most often causes of error in kids' spellings. And Bruce also, with all of his work with many kids over time, has realized that kids need a lot more practice with things like hard and soft C. So while in the very beginning of the program, we just point out and practice with simple syllables the difference between hard and soft C and get kids to understand the relationship between spellings with the letter C and spellings with letter K and when we do what. At more advanced levels, we're working with words like these, in which we begin by having kids recognize what is a hard C, what is a soft C, and have kids sort words. We do a lot of word sorting in the more advanced lessons on different aspects of orthography. We call these chameleon consonants because they change depending on the context in which they are being used. The word eccentric is a great one for hard and soft C next to one another right there. We also do a lot of phoneme grapheme matching or mapping in spellography. For example, we have a lesson on the vowel team OU, but of course the problem with the vowel team OU is that it represents a lot of different sounds. So one way to get at this is to have kids take a word, map it by putting a grapheme in a box for each phoneme. This is like L. Conan boxes at a more advanced level. And after this is done, and we can see how it plays out here, and we can ask kids, what is the sound that OU represents in proud? How about group? How about ounce? How about youth? Tough, cough, enough, and though. And here, what is GH doing? It is part of a four-letter grapheme that represents the speech sound ah. And the word thought, in spite of all of its letters, has only 3 speech sounds, only 3 phoneme-grapheme correspondences. And this process of mapping out how these correspondences work is extremely important for getting kids to pay attention to all of the letters in a word, but also to understand that those letters have a function. A grapheme has a functional correspondence with a phoneme, and in this case also GH can represent f on the end of a word, as in tough and cough. And it can also, and enough, but it can also then just be part of a vowel. So that's tricky. But the beginning is just to make kids aware of what's what and what the possibilities are. We do a lot of word sorting with these vowels. This is especially true of Book C, where we're doing a lot with vowel teams and vowel spellings that are complex. So, for example, the difference between oo and you is very important in spelling. And although many phonics programs just mix up all so-called long U words, the fact is that the spelling patterns associated with oo and with you are different. So to get at this, we have kids spelling oo by the position in which the sound occurs. So in this exercise, inside a syllable or a word, as in flute, juice, soup, or droop, at the end of an open syllable, as in tuna, superb, or in final position at the end of a word. So one of the things we learn from this is that at the end of a word, oo can be spelled ue or ew. But in the middle of a word, inside of a syllable, it can be spelled U consonant E, UI, OU, or OO. But this is not true for you. So we have kids doing the same exercise with words that have U, as in cute, puny, Q, few, huge, feud, rescue, so on. So it turns out that in final position, U can also be spelled with EW and UE. And it can be spelled at the end of an open syllable with a U, but the inside of syllable spellings are limited to EU or UE. So, for example, OU cannot spell you inside a syllable or a word. That's why, if you're paying attention and you want to know how to spell coupon, the word cannot be coupon because OU, it's related to French, coupon, but it's as in, gray poupon mustard. You can't say coupon because OU is not a spelling for you in a word like that. It is a spelling for oo only, just plain oo. On the orthographic level, we do a lot with the application of these ending rules, the doubling rule, the drop silent E rule, the change Y rule, or just we call it the Y rule, because kids eternally have difficulties applying these rules and recognizing when they need to be applied. One lesson doesn't do it. We have to do many lessons, many revisitings. So this level of exercise is way advanced. We don't start here, but I want you to see where we can go with this, where, for example, in asking the child to spell grunginess, we ask them to consider what to do with the silent E, whether to change Y to I, and in this case that does happen, and what kind of suffix is being added and what effect that has on the spelling of the word. So they're not just trying to memorize, they're thinking through why the word is spelled the way it is. And we ask them to come up with these spellings after a lot of instruction. We also do some work with homophones. Homophones, as you know, are terribly difficult for kids with spelling problems. And the only way through that dilemma is giving them a lot of practice using words in context that are these homophonic pairs. So I heard the dog what when my what took off his sneakers. Um, so probably the amount of practice that we give kids will help. It may not fix the problem altogether, but at least we have a basis for practicing these homophone pairs that are so problematic for kids. And again, we don't want kids just to memorize a spelling with a definition. We want them to apply the spelling and think about the meaning of what they're writing and hope that they will associate the right spelling with the meaning. Okay, so now we're on to morphology and etymology and what we do with this. Just some examples of what we do with this. Well, first of all, we structure our lessons in morphology according to the morpheme structures that are typical of the base layer from which a word came. So on the Anglo-Saxon or Old English layer of language, which is the heavy emphasis in the beginning of spellography, we teach the basic inflections and how to combine them onto base words. And we work with Anglo-Saxon suffixes, as in forward, W-A-R-D. That comes up pretty early. And French, these old French spellings, or these spellings that we got from French, especially soft C and QU and OU and CH for sh and so on, these come in to our lessons. We don't make a big deal of the French layer, but we incorporate direct instruction in these spellings and recognize them as problematic for kids and worthy of a lot of practice. And then mainly we focus on what scholars call the technical language, the technical aspect of the English language, which is the Latin layer, which is the base layer of language in at least half of our content area, vocabulary. It's the layer that kids really begin to need at grade 4 and on. So we start pretty early teaching Latin roots, like ject, I think is the first one that we teach. And we teach kids a lot about combining prefixes, roots, suffixes, and occasionally Latin plurals at the more advanced level. And by book D, we're working with Greek morphology and combining forms, as in astronaut. So to start at in the beginning levels of spellography, we're focused on Old English prefixes and their meaning, such as be. Look at all the words from the Anglo-Saxon layer of English that have be. Beloved, beheld, beneath, bemuse, betwixt, bedazzle, befuddle, between. But this prefix has at least 2 different detectable influences on the meanings of words to which it's added. So we ask kids to think about the meanings of these words as they are sorting them and ask them to think about where the prefix is, where the prefix means near, on all sides, or about, and in which words the prefix means to make or cause or treat. And that requires a lot of talk and using the words in the context of spoken language and written language as well. And then later on, we're focused on the Latin layer again. For example, when we get to teaching the prefix C, S-E, as in select, seclude, secret, segregate, and secede, we give a lot of examples and then ask the kids to think again, to deduce what the prefix might mean, and then how the pronunciation of the prefix changes in these words. For example, here we have select, which is a schwa, seclude, a schwa, secret, where it's a long vowel, segregate, which is a short vowel, and secede, which again is a schwa. And then we do a lot with the relationship between word structure and word meaning. And very often we ask kids to either look up the word meaning or think about the word meaning on the basis of the combination of its morphemes. And then we very often have little fluency building exercises in the lessons. This is a brainchild of Bruce because he has found, and this is borne out increasingly by research, a new article, meta-analysis of these features of word study that show again that teaching kids to recognize words like this quickly has an effect on their reading comprehension and their reading fluency. And to recognize them quickly, we can teach them how to spell the words. So teaching kids how to spell the words and then asking them to engage in brief timed readings of word lists like this, which are an embodiment of what we've been teaching them about the structure of the words, is very important in solidifying memories for the words and enhancing kids' attention to detail. So they can't gloss over this. They can't guess. They have to read sever and severe as different. Secret and secrete as different. Sequence and sequester. Seclude, seclusion. Secede, succession. And get those pronunciation shifts as they pronounce those words. We teach assimilated prefixes, especially in books C and D. What is this? It's a prefix that changes its form to match the root or base to which it's added, and its form becomes similar to the root. Notice assimilated and similar. So, for example, the Latin prefix IR can also be spelled these different ways, and these words all have a prefix IR that has been disguised in the words immerse, illegal, and inbound. But this prefix means not. It's a version of IN, which means not, as in, let's see. Well, although inbound, well, inbound doesn't mean not. Inbound has the other meaning for the prefix in. Sorry, I tangled that one up. But illegal means not legal. Immerse means immerse. Okay, so it can mean either into or toward or not or without. There it is right in front of me. Okay. So by the time we get to more advanced levels, we give kids roots. For example, these all follow VCE spelling patterns. And we have taught them a lot about these roots already. So then we ask them to write the root that means this. We give them the meaning. They are to match the root and its spelling to that meaning. And then we want them to come up with words that use that root. And they can do it out of the top of their heads. They can do it as a group exercise. They can do it using their online dictionary if they have it at their disposal. The last and most wonderful lesson, I think, in Book D is unique. It is a creation of Bruce's. It is about the language of mathematics. And what he does in that lesson, I hope is going to be widely appreciated for anyone who's working with a math teacher who wants to help the kids with their uh, the vocabulary of math concepts. And we we teach, or the lesson teaches everything about words referring to mathematical operations and concepts, but we show kids that there's a difference between uni from Latin, mono from Greek, and one from Old English in the way we build words. So here we want the kids to supply the prefix that makes a real word. Universe, monochrome, everyone, unification, monotone, and someone here. What do we do with syntax? Well, we have enough practice with the roles that words play within a sentence frame using this kind of sentence framework that kids can rehearse and hopefully remember the difference between the function of an adjective, a noun, an adverb, a verb, and a noun. And this is not accomplished lightly, as anyone who teaches kids about grammar knows. And it comes into play, or this awareness of the role that a word plays in its grammatical name, if you will, it's part of speech. It's important because when we get to spellings of words like delegate and delegate, the spelling and pronunciation, the spellings remain the same, but the pronunciation changes according to the part of speech of the word. So if we say, I delegate you to be our delegate to the convention, the way we've changed pronunciation is a pattern that occurs in many, many words with this suffix in English, and we give kids a lot of practice with those different forms of the word and their different uses in sentences. Suffixes, we teach according to the language of origin. So, can you attach an ER or an OR to walk and teach? What do those words take? Of course, they take an ER. How about tract and profess? What do they take on the end? Of course, an OR, tractor and professor. And why is the question? Because these are Anglo-Saxon based words, and these are Latin based roots, as it turns out. And OR is a typical suffix for a Latin based root, whereas ER is the typical suffix for an Anglo-Saxon based root. So, this idea that word origin and word structure and spelling are intricately intertwined comes across in many of our lessons. So for example, AR comes into the mix too. We have 3 lessons on R-controlled vowels. And at the more advanced levels, we're dealing with these ER, OR, AR, ULAR suffixes. And here the Latin AR or ULAR adjectives mean having to do with of what kind. And if you take off AR, you seldom get a whole word. So a word like similar, regular, cedar, polar, lunar, solar, if you take AR off of those words, you do not have a word that's left. But if you take ULAR off, you may very well have a noun that's left. So tubular can leave you with tube, rectangular, rectangle, muscular, muscle, vehicular, vehicle, molecular, molecule. And that It's just another way in which this spelling seems to have something to do with the kind of word to which it is added, and it has something to do with how we spell that ending. So here, for example, we ask kids if you add ARY to these base words, what do you get? A noun or an adjective? So in order to figure that out, kids have to use the words in sentences and then say, well, dictionary is a noun, but reactionary can be an adjective or a noun. Infirmary is a noun. Primary is an adjective or a noun. Visionary, either one. Or an adversary, a noun. So we're constantly referring kids back to how the words are used. That's very important. So to sum this up, what makes a good speller? Our lead character, we have a cast of characters who help the kids with a little narrative about all the fun they're having learning to spell. And Hari is our main guy. He's like an eighth grader who's a spelling bee champion, and he's always helping his little sister and his friends understand better why words are spelled the way they are. And in the very last book, he is preparing for the state spelling bee. And I won't tell you whether he wins it or not. You have to get hold of the book to find out. But this is what a spelling bee champion knows and asks. It is a frame of mind. It's an attitude about words. It is an approach to thinking about why words are spelled the way they are. So they ask, how's the word pronounced? And are there alternate pronunciations? That's the phonological layer that we teach. What does the word mean? That has to do with morphology and semantics. Can you use it in a sentence? That's a syntactic usage piece of spelling. What language did it come from? That's etymology or language of origin, which has something to do with the way the pieces are spelled. And English spelling, for better for worse, represents all of these aspects of language. And we want kids to come away from spellography being very curious about and entertained by all the possibilities that come from asking all these questions about any given word that they encounter. So our expected outcomes are improved spelling, improved written expression with more advanced vocabulary, improved reading fluency, and improved vocabulary knowledge and reading comprehension. And most of all, greater interest and appreciation for language that will propel them on through the rest of their academic careers. It's what we hope. So back to you.
Back to me. I think that's me.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you,
that would
Louise.
be Bruce.
That would
Thank
be
you,
me.
Bruce.
All right. Well, I do want to ping back one pong that came my way, and that is where this program comes from. I was worked at the Reading Institute and various colleges teaching advanced graduate students, and the core textbook was speech to print. And I had 2 decades of that almost. And speech to print is the backbone. And in speech to print, you learn about the layers of language, not for their own sake, but by way of learning what words are, where they come from, how they're put together. And that study was so amazing and interesting, but that study, speech to print, is for teachers and scholars.
Mm.
It's how do you translate that for kids? And so that's been the mission for several decades now between Louisa and I, is taking what I learned studying with Louisa about the layers of language, understanding what those layers have to do with learning, understanding the sequence, and then working like for decades to piece it all together. So the scope and sequence very quickly. Book A is the entry level. We start with consonant blends. We really focus on Old English. We focus a lot on closed syllables, although you also have to introduce silent E and some variation in terms of hard, soft C and G in that book. So it takes you through closed syllables, it takes you through consonant doubling, a little bit of the silent E rule. When you go to book B, that is another entry level book. Book A is entry level if the kids really need to be studying consonant blends and complex consonant spellings like DGE and TCH. Book B picks up on that for the first three lessons. When you get to the middle of book B, you have a review of Old English patterns, and then we flip to a focus on vowels and vowel patterns, and that opens things up to open syllables and VCE syllables and rules, silent E rule. Book C then goes into a much deeper dive in syllable types, where you're studying vowel teams, you're studying a more advanced level of R control vowels, studying consonant LE syllables because you need to have more than one syllable in a consonant LE word. So that's a good reason to review all syllable types. And then we get much more invested in Latin morphology and more advanced usage because we start using Latin suffixes. Book D is a real advanced word study book. I'm super proud of it because Book D really prepares kids for advanced study in content areas in high school. And so there's a return to hard and soft C because hard and soft C looks different and is much more complex when you get to Latin and Greek words, multisyllabic words. And then we get into the Latin morphology topics, including assimilated prefixes and derivational suffixes and compound suffixes, and the way in which roots will change their spelling and pronunciation in different forms. So Book D is a real anchor point for advanced study in the sciences, in social science, in literature, and all of that. Um, it took decades to develop the scope and sequence. And the point is to take a concept and then to come back to it at a higher level and then come back to it at an even higher level. We teach soft C in initial position in book A, hard and soft C, and that's the initial, study of that. But hard and soft C comes back when you use like IC as a suffix and ICAL and so forth. And then C really comes back in a complicated way in Latin words where you're using CIOUS and CIATE. And so you take a concept, you teach it at a simple level, you review it at a more complex level, and then you review it again as you get to upper level word study. And that's what we've realized in this program. So I really hope you get a chance to dig in a little bit, check out the samples that are provided, and have a chance to work with your students with these materials.
Thank you so much, Bruce and Louisa. So first of all, I got to say this is like a professional learning evening for all of us, and the chat is just lit up with thank yous and loves and likes. And Donna said, this is excellent. All schools should be doing this in the early years. In teachers training, this is very surface, and that's so true. And I think one thing that comes through with spellography for me is not only is it beneficial for our students, but it also is instructive to us as teachers. As we teach it, we learn so much about the layers of language that really enrich us in our instructional choices. So thank you. And we have about 5 or 6 questions that we're not going to be able to get to tonight just because of time. But Bruce or Louisa, could you just mention the one that came up a lot was, kind of the grade span when you think about A, B, C, D, both in tier 1 and tier 2. So could one of you address that?
Yeah, Bruce.
Okay, so this always comes up. And the quick answer is that you teach students at their level. What does a student need? And so intermediate grades, by that we mean 4, 5, and 6, sometimes advanced students in grade 3, but somewhere in that range for tier 1
Tier
instruction.
1. great.
but
So three,
a
four,
lot
five, six for tier one,
here, right.
about-ish. Yeah.
Right. That's right. It would be an advanced program for third grade. And
Mm-hmm.
and certainly when you by the time you get to book D, it's an advanced program for, for fifth grade.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I ended up working a lot of my career with middle school and high school students who are functioning at an intermediate grade level. A lot of kids get stuck around a third or fourth grade level, even though they're in middle school and high school or adults.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, as a tier two program, then it's diagnostic prescriptive. It's
Yeah.
what does a student know? What do they need to know? And where does that fit?
Sure.
We do have spelling inventories that help with the placement into the program. There are other informal inventories that are available as well. And you'll notice as you're teaching the program that there's a lot of diagnostic information at hand as you go through a lesson. So the repeated reads are give you
Mm-hmm.
diagnostic information. The dictations that happen almost every lesson, that gives you diagnostic information. So you're always trying to match the level of the content with the
Mm-hmm.
needs of your students.
Student. And I want to reiterate for those that maybe weren't able to see the very beginning slides that it is designed as a small group, um, as a small group instruction, and therefore you can be more diagnostic in terms of what levels the students are working in. Is that correct?
Yeah, so well, it's designed for with multiple access points.
Mm-hmm.
I see one of the questions was, what if the student gets like almost all the words correct on the inventory? What's left to study?
Mm-hmm.
Because spellography is not just a spelling program, it's a word study program. And the units are designed so that when you get into lessons 4, 5, and 6, what you're studying is morphology and usage and etymology. And those are aspects that enrich students' usage of words, enrich students' ability to take apart unknown words that are more complex.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of ways to adapt the
Great.
program to different groupings and for
Yeah.
students that need more basic instruction and for students that need more challenge.
Great, great. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for clarifying. That was probably the most common question that we had tonight. So I do want to thank all of you for staying just a few minutes late beyond our time so that I can share a little bit about the professional learning and also have our drawing and our giveaway. So please know that Spellography as a resource is surrounded by professional learning opportunities, including private sessions, product training sessions for schools or districts, which is a 3-hour session. We also offer virtual 3-hour, what we call public workshops, where individuals can tune in, schools, districts can tune in. And you'll see from this slide that we have some upcoming spellography sessions in October and November. And we also provide coaching, on-site coaching sessions on spellography. So we really do provide kind of wraparound support for you when you purchase and use spellography. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Our last slide tonight is just a slide that has contact information for all of our account executives. So if you want to know more about how to procure spellography or anything about any of our other programs in our ecosystem, our literacy ecosystem, here is contact information for our account executives. You also have contact information for Louisa, Bruce, and myself. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. We know that your time is super valuable and it's just really meaningful and honoring to us that you would join us tonight. So I think I speak on behalf of Bruce and Louisa and my colleague Barbara when I say thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you do and for being with us, and let us know if we can support you in any way. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.